to kind of find myself as the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy, meaning I do a little bit of everything. I started out very small. I really just started advocating to people in our own community, neighborhood. Uh, I talk about something called the three C's. And the three C's for me are one of the hardest things that a family can do is take a vacation for so many reasons, right?
Welcome to the Wheel With It podcast with your host, Devon. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. My name is Devon Wieters, and today on the show we have John Fela. He is a disability advocate, he is a dad, and I think you're really going to like this conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation, so there's a lot to learn from this one. So please enjoy my conversation with John Fela. Hello, welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. My name is Devon Wieters, and today we have John Fela. Hello, John, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
First of all, tell us about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So I like to kind of find myself as the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy, meaning I do a little bit of everything. First of all, I identify as a parent of disability. I have a son, Chris, who's 17 and on the autism spectrum and is also nonverbal. I live in the Chicago area. He currently is at a residential facility out in Wichita, Kansas. For the time being, he's just finishing up some high school there. And then otherwise, I'm really involved in the disability world as a whole. So my day job is I actually work for an organization called Johnny and Friends, which is a global Christian disability organization. And we support families and people with disabilities all over the world. We do a variety of outreach. We do retreats for families in the summer. We do marriage getaways for parents of disability. Do warrior getaways if there are veterans who are now experiencing disability kind of thing. We have a wheelchair ministry all over the world where we collect wheelchairs and send them out to partner countries for those who are in need of that. And my job specifically is I work with churches of any size or denomination to train them on how to welcome people with disabilities, how to build programs and structures in their churches to help welcome and facilitate people who are coming to them or our current members who identify with disability. As well as on the side, I do a lot of advocacy. So I do a variety of writing, specifically blog writing with a bunch of different national organizations. I do speaking, I do podcasts, specifically on topics of being a parent of disability, raising a child with a disability, and also working as a dad who identifies as at one time as a single dad. I'm divorced from my son's mom and now remarried. Being able to work through those kind of family dynamics when it's like a blended family or there's divorce kind of things. So literally a little bit of everything.
So what made you decide to get involved in advocacy and things like that?
So I would tell you that it started out for me, and I talk about this in my presentations that I do live at conferences and things like that. But one of the things I talk about is that when my son first had his diagnosis when he was about 3, so I'm going back now about 15 years, I realized very quickly that I did not have community. I did not have people around that really understood what I was going through. My wife at the time, my son's mom, our family went through a season of life where we went through a lot of struggle and nothing was working. We had issues with his schooling because we weren't sure of the right match for that. We had financial issues. I had a job loss. Our marriage was on shaky ground. So there was a lot going on there. And what I realized as part of going through that experience was we didn't really have a lot of friends who understood what we were dealing with and didn't know how to help us. And we didn't have a lot of people we could relate to. So, what we did was, and specifically myself, my journey has been identifying and building real community with people experiencing disability, whether individuals, themselves or parents of, in terms of a family context. So uh, I started out very small. Uh, I really just started advocating to people in our own community, neighborhood. Uh, Started putting together like parent groups, like dads groups that would meet kind of thing. And again, small stuff, but some stuff that was really impactful. And then I got involved through some various connections with some organizations that were doing disability ministry around the country, and I started doing writing for them, blog writing kind of a thing. And I started out very small, and honestly, I wasn't even sure if it was something I would enjoy, but I kind of took to it, and so I started writing for other folks as well. And so I've been doing that for several years, and now I've actually gotten to contribute to a few friends' books and that type of thing, which is great. And then just going around the country and speaking at these events, talking about my experience as a dad, and specifically as someone who has not just raised a child with a disability, but also experienced divorce, now remarried. So my son has a stepmom, and just all of those dynamics. But there's a lot that happens when a family has disability, and if they're not really prepared for it, which most aren't, and they don't have that support or resources, then they need to be able to find them and engage that, because without it, you find yourself on an island very quickly. And then when you don't have that help and things get hard, then it can really apply a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to the family.
So what are the challenges of being a special needs dad? There are many, but
Yeah. So on the one hand, some of the challenges are very like obvious, right? One of the things I had to figure out early on is, okay, there were some things my son didn't like to do or couldn't do. A lot of things were just different, right? Like my son was never going to play like Little League, or he wasn't going to join the soccer team, or he wasn't going to play whatever sport, or he's not going to be involved in some like academic special gifted program or something. He's got challenges. But part of the thing for me was I had to learn how to connect with him. So, one of the things I always talk about is, when he was little, I actually spent a lot of time with him on the weekends, and we'd spend time on the weekends. And my his mom at the time actually had a second job where she worked on the weekends. So, it was just me and him, and we would just hang out, and we would just do things, go to parks, go to museums, all of that, play places. And it was just a way for me to connect with him. And just like any other kid, he wanted that time, and he liked that time, and he had fun. And then even as he got older, and he really couldn't play sports, but you could see he liked sports on TV. So that's something we could do together, or maybe shoot the basketball, out in the driveway with the hoop we had, just that kind of stuff. He couldn't really do it all, but he liked doing it with me. But then another level of being a special needs dad that's hard is that most men, because they're guys, aren't always good about sharing their feelings or wanting to share with others when they're having trouble. Right? Men are fixers. Uh, if I can't fix my kid, then I just don't want to talk about it. Uh, and that's hard. And there's a lot of good dads out there, and there's a lot of ones that I've met that are great dads. Uh, yeah, but a lot struggle, and a lot speak to how they at least struggle until they kind of figure it out. And many struggle to the point where, again, like the marriage just fails, and maybe in some cases the dad wants nothing to do with the child, which is an absolute shame. But uh, for me, what I had to learn, what was my role? My son's mom, my ex-wife, did a great job with him and still does, in terms of like managing a lot of things and handling school and insurance and doctors and all of that. And not that I didn't help with that, but because that was so much her thing, and because she mostly wanted to do that, I had to figure out, what's my role? What's my job? What do I do? So I had to learn how to bring my kind of gifts and talents to the table, as far as not just having a relationship with my son, but then also in the ways that I could also give back to others. And then at the same time, with all the resources I have that I share with others, it's also things we use for my own family too, and for my own son.
so what's your advice for like blended families that are affected by special needs?
Yeah, so that's also an interesting challenge. I will tell you that, unfortunately, and I don't like to quote like a percentage or a number, because I know it changes, and there's not like really accurate information out there. But uh, the majority of families with disability wind up divorced. That's just a fact. Uh, and so, and there are a lot of unique challenges in there. And without going to all the details of it, when there is divorce and when the families are separate, uh, one piece of advice, and I've written stuff about this, and I've also done talks about it, is I talk about something called the three C's. And the three C's for me are communication, coordination, and compassion. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, and a lot of these are kind of skills or aspects of doing life in a blended family that I had to learn when I first got divorced. And interestingly enough, we actually got divorced during COVID. That also made it challenging.
That's
Uh,
fun.
yeah, that was something else, I will tell you. But it was an interesting experience because I really learned to work these steps. So, like communication, for example, okay, yes, you need to know what your child's schedule is. When is your child going to be with mom? When are they going to be with dad? When do they have appointments after school or whatever's going on? That's practical stuff. But at the same time, uh, you need to be able to work together. And many times, you especially if there's some like animosity between the mom and the dad, former married couple, uh, it's hard for them to communicate. So it's a matter of just remembering to be respectful, being on the level, and just saying, "Hey, listen, we both have the interest of doing what's right for our child. Uh, if there's something I can communicate to you, that might be some helpful information or something like even during COVID, when it first hit, I was calling my son's mom and talking to her. Hey, I had heard all this stuff is going to be closed now, or this restaurant might be closed that he likes to go to, or this place. So, what do you think? How can we manage it? How can we get creative? That type of thing. And then coordination goes along with that. So coordination is, hey, we're working together, we're working on a common calendar, a common schedule, but also too, are there ways I can maybe support the other parent in terms of helping to make things easier, either for them or just for our situation. It's really hard in some cases to be nice to the person that you just got divorced from, but at the same time, when you remember that it's about your child, that piece actually overcomes and the emotions you have. And when you make it about your child, then you can say, okay, what is really the best uh, strategy we have here? And again, doing that during COVID, we really needed to be coordinated with a lot of things as far as how are we going to address certain things with him, and then compassion, right? So remembering, and this was something especially in COVID when uh, it was a crisis that affected everybody, and the whole world was shut down basically, and nobody was going anywhere. But it was a reminder of, okay, listen, uh, you can choose to be angry or frustrated or whatever emotion you want to have about your marriage, but uh, that's still your child's mom. And so you want to remember, for me during COVID, it was, how did I want to be remembered when this is all over, whenever that is? How do I want to be remembered? Do I want myself or her or anybody else to think of me as just being angry or not cooperative or just not showing up? Or do I want to rise above that and say, you know what? Regardless of what happened between us, we both love him and we're both going to do our best. So that was really a big reminder for me. And it's a reminder for everybody today, even without COVID, is think about the person you want to be seen as, because it's easy to get into your emotions and the drama and the anger. But if you can separate yourself from that and remember, okay, listen, this is about my child, not about this other person. Uh, and at the end of the day, we have to work together. Uh, and with disability, in my son's case, we'll be working together probably the rest of his life. So, what do you really want that to look like? So, those are some tough things that a lot of times you have to look at. And then in terms of being remarried, uh, I will tell you that it's certainly been a blessing to be remarried, because my new wife, his stepmom, uh, loves him, loves disability, loves the work I do, even though she's a nurse. Uh, she still works with disability in some respects, and she actually volunteers a lot, including with my organization as well. Uh, so a lot of times with a blended family, and again, we actually, because of the communication relationship his mom, ex-wife, and I have, uh, we've actually done very well with her becoming part of the family and supporting us, and really supporting him. But again, those three pieces, those three C's really have made a difference for us because now we know we're all kind of on the same page and we're all working together to be best for him.
So, tell us about the organization you started, the really cool organization you started, and what that does for people.
Okay, you mean Johnny and Friends?
Yes.
Okay, so actually, I didn't start that. I just worked for them, but I will absolutely tell
Oh,
you about them. So Johnny and Friends, and believe it or not, Johnny is actually a woman. I know a lot of people think it's a guy or they think her name is Joni. It's actually Johnny. So that actually is a woman. So the story of Johnny is her name's Johnny Erickson Tata. She is in her 70s now.
I love
All
her, by the way.
Oh, you know her. Okay, good. Yeah. So
Well,
that's
I
the
don't
founder.
know her, but I know of her.
Right. So, yeah. So this is basically her organization that she started over 40 years ago. She became a quadriplegic at 17 because of a diving accident. Uh, and she tried to find outlets for her life because obviously it's not what she planned. And what's great about her story is, you know, she basically talks about how she was so angry about her situation. She actually prayed to God, God, if you won't let me die, because she did think about killing herself early on. She said, if you won't let me die, teach me how to live. So she developed some outlets. She actually got into painting, which she still does. She paints with a brush in her mouth and she does some amazing work. But then she started the ministry. And so the ministry now is in over 30 countries on 5 continents. And we do all of those different outreaches that I mentioned. And again, what's great about our offices, we have offices around the country. So we are in every state of the US. Now, our physical office might not be in every state, but our offices cover several states. So, like in the Chicago area, we cover 5 states, right? And we do outreach with all of those families. So, if there are families out there that are looking to get connected, especially with our family retreats, because what's really cool about our family retreats is that it's an opportunity for a family as a whole, right? Not just the person with the disability going somewhere, but the whole family getting to take a vacation. One of the hardest things that a family can do is take a vacation for so many reasons, right? Whether it's because it's hard to travel, or maybe in some cases if there's medical equipment or just like a certain environment you need. But we provide everything. We have a dedicated uh, it's actually a retreat center. It's really on Lake Michigan, in the state of Michigan, so about halfway up the lower part. And we're there 4 weeks in the summer, and a family can sign up, the entire family, mom, dad. Uh, if there's siblings, typical disability doesn't matter, grandma, grandpa, everybody can come. And we have programs for everybody and for every age, every level, doesn't matter. We have activities, food, everything is included, and it's a wonderful experience. So it's a great thing if you're a family that's found it hard to travel, or maybe just travel somewhere where people actually get you and accept you and are willing to help you. Oh, by the way, whoever has the disability in the family, regardless of their age or condition, gets a one-on-one buddy the whole week. And that person is trained and that person works with you and the family the whole time. I think that's awesome. And again, we do things like marriage getaways for parents, so parents can get away on a weekend and do like a little class or workshop on marriage. And then, of course, with the work that I do with churches, which is if you don't have a church you belong to, or maybe you belong to a church, but they're not supporting disability, or maybe you're looking for extra resources for your own family or whatever, that's also what we do. And again, specifically my job. We have a lot of stuff on our website that actually is just free to use and download and that kind of thing. Um, but we also have people in the offices that literally can work with you, train you, um, and help to provide some resources and things.
So, how do you specifically work with churches to support individuals and families with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so it comes like a variety of ways, but the biggest thing is usually when I connected with the church, I asked them, like, where are you guys at? Because unfortunately, a lot of times with churches, they see families of disability as, okay, we want them to be here maybe, but uh, how can we do that? Let's just figure out how to get like a buddy, or let's set up like a little sensory area or something, and then we're done. And the reality is that from our perspective, disability ministry is about welcoming all of these folks and all of these families into the congregation as a whole. It's not a separate thing. It's not just a classroom. It's not just, okay, those folks meet over there and everybody else meets over here. They're part of the community. And so a lot of what we talk about to churches is really their belief about disability, right? And do you have like a climate or an environment of acceptance when these people come in, when these families come in? If they're a new family, do they feel welcome? Do they feel like you want them to be there? Because there are churches I've talked to legitimately, and things I've heard from other people where they say, sorry, we don't want you here, or we can't help you, or why don't you just go to the church down the street? And no one wants that, right? No one wants that experience for them or their family. So we talk to them about kind of what they believe about it, and then we drill down in terms of, okay, what should it look like? Because it's going to look different for everybody. Every church is a little bit different size. Maybe they all don't have the same resources or volunteers or whatever. That's okay. We try to figure something out for them. So it's really a conversation about, what do you want it to look like? If it's a physical space we need to put together, we can absolutely work with you to do that. If it's more about maybe curriculum, or maybe you want to adapt certain things, we can work with you with that too. If it's even just the building not being accessible for people, let's say for wheelchair users, or those who have mobility issues, we can also talk and coach you in terms of how to also make that happen as well. So it's a variety of things, but the biggest piece is their attitude toward people with disabilities in general, and are they welcoming them? And if they're not, then that's really the first place we start.
So how has your son's disability affected his choice or opportunities for education and independence?
So when he was very young, when he was first diagnosed, we thought about sending him to public school. Where we lived at the time in Illinois, we didn't like the schools that were by us. So we tried to send him to some private schools, like private preschools and that kind of thing, but they didn't have special ed programs. They weren't special ed trained. So it was very challenging for him and very challenging for us. So what we had to do, which a lot of families actually wind up doing in our situation, is we moved ourselves to a different town. So we live in like the North Illinois suburbs. Uh, we moved from one town to another. It was about a half hour, 45-minute distance, uh, to an area we knew that had really good schools and really supported special ed and disability in the schools. And so it was kind of a sacrifice we had to make, because we had to decide we were going to sell our house. We had to decide we were going to move. We had to figure out where we were going to move to. And once we found that right school district, and that's what we did. For a lot of families like us, it's exactly that situation. We have a child with a disability. Uh, the local schools are just not giving us what we need. Where can we go? Now, I will say this, because I also have a background in education. I was a teacher for years as well. And I've worked in public schools and I've worked in private schools. And the thing that I always talk to families about, and we had this experience too, is a lot of families, especially with disability, they don't want to send their kids to a public school because they think public schools are bad, or they don't have the funding, or it's a bad environment or something. The reality is that a lot of public schools actually may be very good in terms of what the program offers, because again, legally the schools have to offer a certain degree of services. And again, if you have an IEP, if you go to the public school, and even if you attend a private school, you can still get an IEP. But whatever's in that IEP, that's what legally has to be provided, whether it's by the public school if you attended the public school, or even if you attend a private school or homeschooled, you still have an opportunity to access those services. Uh, so in my son's case, we were blessed in that, we were able to figure out how to move him. Okay, get him out of the private school situation, get him to a public school that actually really worked, and actually worked very well for him. Right? And so again, that's not every public school. I get it, but in our case, we found one that was really right for him, and he was able to go through that public school system. Uh, and he went into high school, and his freshman year was fine. Now, I mentioned that he's living in Wichita, Kansas, and there's a reason for that, because last year, his sophomore year of school was not good. Um, and there were a lot of reasons for that, but it basically, after talking to the school for months, we realized it just wasn't a good fit anymore. So now we had to make a different choice. What was that choice? We tried to send him to something that was in our area, obviously, and when there wasn't a match there, we looked at something out of state. And the school that he's at now, which is called Heart Spring in Wichita, Kansas, was actually a perfect fit for him. And in fact, his school district back home is actually paying for that because, again, by law, if they can't educate him, they have to provide an environment that will, and that just happened to be the best match. And he's having a wonderful experience so far. So that's also even not anything to say about his old school district, uh, but it's just the fact that sometimes things just aren't a match. And as parents, we also can't have the assumption of, well, of course this is going to work because why not? Well, it might work, it might not. And so that's where you also have to be flexible to making a change if necessary.
So, how has your uh, position as a teacher and a parent influenced your advocacy?
So definitely as a parent, uh, you know, you obviously have like a certain perspective, and as a teacher, you have a certain perspective. As a parent, my perspective has been that of obviously you're defending your child, you want to protect your child, you want to make sure that as many services are available to your child. That's exactly what they're going to be getting. Uh, but being a teacher as well, having the experience of being on that other side of the table, so to speak, that has also reminded me to have a lot of compassion and empathy for the people working, because the reality is that teaching is a very hard job. It really is on any level. And what would frustrate me, especially working in public schools, is that there really is a shift to um, education really being data driven, and there's nothing wrong with data and numbers and all that, but so much of it is based on testing and looking at numbers and evaluating things. And so the problem is that it's a very hard environment to work in because the expectations are legitimately so high, and the demands on teachers are a lot more. So teachers, especially in special ed, work very hard. And so it's an understanding of, we get how difficult your job is. We as parents are not trying to make your job harder. We just want to make sure that whatever our child needs, they're getting. And otherwise, if we want to work with you, and that was a big thing that his mom and I always believed in, working with the schools, working with the staff, having the conversations, and keeping the communication open, as well as, because my son always did a lot of private therapy at different clinics and things like ABA, having those specialists and therapists talk to the school staff and share information and say, hey, maybe they're doing something that's good, you want to talk to them about or copy or whatever, vice versa. What are you seeing here, what are you seeing there? And so no one's trying to hide anything, but when all the information is out there, it doesn't become um, someone getting angry about, well, you said you were going to do this and that didn't happen. Well, actually, we've been communicating the whole time, and this is what we talked about. So then if something doesn't work, then you look at how you change it. It doesn't become an us versus them, because so easily that's kind of how a lot of family sees it, and for good reason. But it's also a reminder, too, for me, having been a teacher and also my son's mom, that, what, let's understand that we don't want to make we don't want to make any situation worse because we feel like they're not doing enough, right? Uh, Maybe that can be true in some cases, but it probably isn't in most. So let's just try to support them as best as possible. So again, we get the best outcome for him.
So, what challenges do adults with disabilities face after they get out of the school system?
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Yes, there is. Yes.
Yeah, as I'm sure you know. Yeah. Uh, the hardest thing for me is that it seems like there's this, and I hate to use the word cliff, but I guess that's probably the best visual for it. Uh, Once you get out of like a high school transition program at 21 or 22, usually, then you're kind of on your own, right? And so in the same way that, let's say, a typical person might go to high school, go to college or grad school or medical school or whatever they're going to do. Okay, I'm finished with school. Now what? Well, I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to go move somewhere, I'm going to start my life. Well, most individuals with disabilities, that's not the case with them. Um, you know, definitely, there are a lot that do live on their own, or a lot that do work.
Yeah,
Um,
if
but
you're like me, you can graduate at 18 and try to work. But if you have like intellectual stuff, then
right, yeah, and like in my son's case, because of the severity of his autism, he'll never be able to take care of himself, live on his own, have a job. And even for those who aren't as severe as him, there are still some supports that are needed. So the bottom line is that most families who raise a child with a disability, there's always going to be some support on some level, whether that's directly from the family, whether that's through state or federal funding, or in whether that's the person contributing in some ways as far as having a job and things. But so it's a lot of the practical things in terms of living situations, which I will tell you, living in Illinois, this is a big conversation. And there are actually a lot of families that I know, parents of disability, that are actually starting their own organizations, their own nonprofits to build these kind of residential centers because they ones with good quality, right? Because it's not that there aren't places for people to live necessarily, it's that what is the quality of those environments? What's the quality of the care? How qualified are the people doing the care kind of thing? And so that really all plays into it. So it's not just finding any care, it's finding good care and a good environment. And then likewise with employment, there are a lot of people with disabilities who are employed in a variety of ways, but a lot of those opportunities are also limited for different reasons. And, and I actually was a job coach at one time in my life. So I understand that firsthand. And a lot of times with job matching for an adult with disabilities, many times we had to literally create a job for them, meaning we had to work with a company or a retail store or whatever it was, and really create a job specific to them and who they were, not so much filling a role where they just needed to hire somebody. And that's a unique challenge, and not everybody has that opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is community for me is big. It's a big thing that I speak to, but especially because I find that, like in my son's case, for example, I always talk about how my son has been involved with like all these things, like outside of school, like Special Olympic stuff, and he's done just all of these interesting therapies, and we've had him even volunteer at some places, but he really doesn't have any friends. And some people scratch their head at that, like, how does he not have friends if he's doing all this stuff? Because he doesn't communicate verbally, and because level of his autism, he doesn't have the same social skills. So he doesn't have literally friends that he calls on the weekend and goes to hang out with. So the reality is that he has no siblings. Uh, his mom and dad are only children. Now, of course, I'm remarried, so he has a stepmom and stuff. But the reality is that for most of these folks, even if like siblings or close families involved, at some point, a lot of these people will be gone. Either they're gone because they move or different season of life, or some people just pass away, especially mom and dad. So who are going to be the ones to take care of these folks, or who are going to be the ones to just be there as a friend or a family member, or wish them a happy birthday or a Merry Christmas or I love you or any of that? That's what really scares me as a parent. And when I work with churches, I especially talk to them about that because I talk about, hey, listen, it's not just about having a place for somebody on a Sunday. It's about being a community and a friend to these folks. And you can actually go outside of the church walls and actually be that for them at whatever age of life, whatever stage of life, wherever they're living, you can still be that lifeline for them. And that is so important and so needed.
so why is community so important other than like what you just said?
Community is important because at the end of the day, most people who are typical, who do not identify with a disability, again, their life is going to have probably a certain, I'll say, trajectory, meaning there's an expectation, yes, I can find a job somewhere. Yes, I can live on my own. Yes, I can take care of myself. But people still need relationships, right? We're meant to be together. So people still need friends, or they still need to date or get married or whatever it is. And likewise, for people with disabilities, the issue is that a lot of those things that we take for granted, those folks may not experience, or at least not experience in the same way. And so because of that, we we really need, I think, to laser focus on community because we need to think about how we can be friends to people who, let's say, have challenges making friends, or for folks whose families are just not around anymore. Uh, those folks, you can always talk about going out and intentionally trying to find people to get connected with, or groups to connect to, or different hobbies to do. But for some folks with disabilities, they don't have a lot of those options. So how can we intentionally kind of build that around them and make sure we're checking in? So it's about relationship, it's about community, it's about friendship, and it's also about care, right? Because again, no one wants to be alone in life. No one wants to feel like, okay, as one person I know put it, you can pay someone to care for your child, but you can't pay for someone to love them, right? Even if somebody's being cared for or has a place to live and their needs met, without people, without those relationships, it's painful, right? And that's the kind of loneliness I don't want for my son, because I know someday I just won't be here anymore. And I really want to know that at least there will be people around who will at least care enough about him to check in on him and spend time with him and just know that he's cared about.
So, anything you want to add before we get off here?
Uh, I would just encourage you, as either if you're a parent of disability hearing this, or even if you have a disability yourself, again, my biggest emphasis is on community for sure. I do see that through a faith lens, but at the same time, as I say, whether you are a person of faith or not, you must have community. So if you don't have community, please connect. You are absolutely welcome to connect with me because I can certainly provide you with resources and things, even in your area, because I'm connected with a lot of national organizations. Uh, One thing I do like to do is talk about how folks can find me. And the one thing I just want to give everybody heads up about. So I do have a website where you can find a bunch of stuff on me, which is just my name, johnfela.com. So just my name.com. However, believe it or not, I recently had a name change because when I was married to my son's mom, previously I actually had a slightly different last name because we actually had a name change when we got married. So my other name, or at least the name I used to go by, is Fela Geller. So Felageller. So if you search me online, you might find things under Fela Geller, or you might find things under Fela. But my website is Fela. A lot of my old content is Fela Geller, but it's all mostly on the website. And you can also connect with me on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those. And if you do John Fela, you will probably find me.
Okay. Um, we will have all those links in the show notes, and we will see you guys next episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell if you're on YouTube or Spotify so you get notified about new episodes, or go to realwithit.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite platform. And we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.
I really like that conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed that too. We will put all of his links in the show notes, and don't forget to like, subscribe, follow this podcast. If you want to subscribe to our audio feed, go to realwithit.com/subscribe. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can go to realwithit.com/YouTube. Don't forget to hit the bell if you're on YouTube or Spotify. Okay, see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to follow the show and our guests on social media and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you'll get notified when we upload new episodes. See you next time.